So Zenzen already made a very short introduction about me, but I am Siebe from Tilburg. I'm 25 years old and I'm doing koi basically all my life. I started with just a very small pond in our back garden, and my dad liked the filtration systems and I liked the fishes. So basically that was a good combination to start a hobby together. And when I was 14 years old, my dad took me to Japan for the first time, even though he's not super interested in koi. He just liked being there with his son. And the first times we went with a another dealer from the Netherlands, but later on he stopped with koi, and then I decided to start myself. That was 5 years ago, and now I'm doing yeah, I'm selling quite a lot of koi all over Europe, also in Germany, Italy, yeah, every country, also to Thailand, USA, because I also do some wholesaling to dealers as well. So that's me, and I will start the presentation now, which I did on the base of Mr. Pan, which you see on the right on my screen, the owner of Changlong Koi Farm. And hopefully you see four Grand Champion titles here. Probably one, I'm in the way of it, but it's in the right corner. Um, and I'm going to tell about the development of those four Grand Champions and how you can see on a young age if the koi has a potential to become a Grand Champion. Yeah, and what are the difference between those koi? So basically, if you if you buy a fish at a young age, for example, this is a very young Nisai of Nogami Koi Farm. You want to know how do we get, or can we get a fish like this? And first of all, I want to say that it's very important to keep water quality good, have a good feeding, take care very well of them, which you can do with Mountain Tree, of course. But this is not about this presentation. This presentation is only about how you can see on the features of the koi itself, and not basically not about the keeping, but more about the structure, the quality, and those kind of things. So now, do you see the right fish as well? Because for myself, I'm in the way, but hopefully you will see it. I've picked three fishes, and those three fishes are from the same age, so they are all Nisai. So now you for yourself, you can pick one in your head if you have a budget, which one you would take, and I will take you from one to three and see how they developed over time. So yeah, you can pick now one, and let's start with number one. Number one, on the left was a very cheap Nisai sold at Narita auction. Narita is a very big dealer in Japan. It was bred by Dainichi Toyota, and yeah, it was just a so-so Nisai, not super special. And yeah, they decided to sell it as Nisai because they didn't think it would be very special. But it later on went to become very special because in 2016 it was the first Grand Champion of Mr. Pan, the guy you saw on the first dia. And now the fish is named Kinsen, and it's one of the most important bloodlines in Dainichi Toyota. And they are already using it for 8 years and with very, very good results. So this koi became from a very ugly Nisai to a very beautiful 8-year-old koi. And over here you see the development from Nisai to Sansai to Yonsai. And it was sold for 2,000 euros. So this was basically a Grand Champion for 2,000 euros in Japan, which is really ridiculous compared to the prices you see koi being sold now. And what's basically pretty special about this koi is that from Nisai to Sansai, it only grew like 6 cm. But from Sansai to Yonsai and from Yonsai to Gosai, it grew more than on a younger age. So what you can get from this koi is that yeah, you need some patience, and also it's more about the keeping technique, because when this koi from Nisai to Sansai, it was put in a mud pond, didn't do super well, but then from Sansai to Yonsai was put in a mud pond again, and it came out very, very well. So as Yonsai, they saw the potential of this koi and then put it in the best keeping ponds they have at Dainichi, and later on prepare it at Narita Koi Farm to become 2016 Grand Champion. And this is koi number two. Koi number two is the most expensive Nisai ever sold from Sakai Fish Farm, or sold on auctions basically. It was sold for 83 million Japanese yen, which translates to 750,000 euros. Yeah, ridiculous price for a Nisai actually. But yeah, the Chinese owner thought it was worth it. This koi was being entered in the All Japan Yonkoi show. Yeah, and now we don't know anything more about it. We've seen it back 2 years ago when it was around 75 cm, but it didn't develop very well. But then you can still think, oh, but maybe it won the All Japan Yonko show then. But that is also not the case because it lost to Momotaro male of only 20,000 euros. So yeah, the most expensive Nisai ever didn't became the most expensive or best koi ever. And now we have the third one, which is also a Nisai of Sakai Fish Farm. Uh, and this one became the second grand champion of Mr. Pan in 2018. But what is special about this koi is that it's also the only koi ever that won the All Japan Young Koi show and the All Japan Koi show in yeah, on the same fish. Um, Only happened one time so far in history, and that only shows that it's so difficult to keep a koi on a very high level from young age to a very, very big age. On the right, it was 2 years old or 1.5 years old, and 62 cm, and in the middle, it was 94 cm at 6 years old. Super special koi, but yeah, it died when it was 7. So yeah, only won one grand champion. Maybe there would be more grand champions if it keep on living, but it died on a quite early age as well. And here you see a very beautiful video of it. It only shows that also in Sakai, when they have the most expensive Nisai, or so many beautiful koi, that it only happens once in history that they could manage to win the All Japan Yonko show and All Japan with one koi. So now if we look back to these three fishes, you see a completely different path of development. From koi one, it became from a pretty ugly duckling, ugly Nisai, to a very beautiful 8 year old koi. The middle one, yeah, had very high hopes, very expensive koi, but yeah, now you can think, I think you can buy it for maybe 5% of the price the owner actually paid for it. So yeah, didn't do what the owner hoped that it would do. And on the right, you see the fish that was very good as Nisai at young age, but also very good at old age. Um, yeah, and this is hopefully or maybe a koi you recognize. This is S Legend, and the most expensive koi ever sold in the world was 1.7 million euros, I believe. Um, Very expensive. Won two grand champions in 2017 and 2019. Very famous koi, but they don't have any pictures of it as Tosai or Nisai. And that's only because at that young age, they didn't thought it would be, yeah, the koi that later on become, because they didn't see the exact potential. So it's pretty strange that you can think of that's the most expensive fish at 6 years old they wouldn't even recognize as a very good koi when it was 4 years old. Even for breeders, it is so difficult to recognize a good koi at a young age that you can think, oh, what we can actually predict and what can we not predict. And what are the most important things about how to predict those koi. So S Legend was sold as Sansai to a Japanese owner. It was swimming in the for sale pond. He bought it and then made pictures of it. 3 years later, it was grand champion, and 5 years later, it was sold as the most expensive fish ever. So, what's the moral of the story? Is that you need a lot of luck, because even the biggest and best breeder in the world, Sakai Fish Farm, is not always able to recognize his best fish at young age. So yeah, then I'm not also possible to tell you how to recognize the best fish at young age. But so are there actually some paths that you can predict? And I think so that there are. You can predict a lot about body shape, and you need a lot of patience. So let's start with the body shape. This is the third koi that you saw on the right. So the Altes by Young Koi Show Grand Champion. I've divided the body in four stages. Stage one needs to be long. This is the head. Needs to be round and very long. Stage two, you have the backbone, which should be very powerful. You need a lot of power and length in that stage. And on stage three, I always ask myself how the fat is distributed, but I have more and better pictures of it on a later page. And stage four is the tail tube, needs to be long as well, powerful, round. And with this kind of body shape, I know it's hard to see on pictures. You can better predict if a koi will be able to grow big. Because if you want to win Grand Champion, 99 of 100 times, you have to be in the biggest view, so in the biggest size. So you need a big fish. And that is also the case with this koi. This is a Dainichi Kohaku. And I think if I would buy this koi as Tosai and want to sell it to my customers for, let's say something, 5,000 euros, that not many people would be interested, only because of the pattern. The pattern at young age was, yeah, not so special. Looks like it has a lot of Benny. Not so unique. I think if you look at a pond and you see this fish, it won't be the first fish that you would recognize. But Dainichi recognized this koi based on the body shape because it was 1 year old, 49 cm, grow to 2 years old, 61 cm, 3 years old, 70, 4 years old, 79. Pretty decent growth. Also, again, this fish, when it was 4 years old and came out of the pond, back then they saw the potential and the whole potential of the fish. They kept it in indoor pond, so in the Dainichi main house, and it later turned on to 6 years old and 93 cm. And this is the third Grand Champion of Mr. Palm that you saw hanging on the wall, and his first and only Grand Champion together with Dainichi. This was the last Grand Champion of Dainichi before they won in last January. So what you can see again on this fish is that the head is long and round at young age. The second part, it's long and powerful. If you look well at the picture, you can see the backbone a little bit. On three is how is the fat distributed, very long, divided all over the body, so not basically in one place. And four is that the tail tube is long and round, even though it's quite hard to see on this picture. There you see side shots, and this is what I mean with the third part, how you can see if the fat is well distributed. On koi on young age, so on the left you see Nisai from Maruyama, on the right you see Kinsen, which is the 2060 Grand Champion as Nisai. You want to have very straight lines on the body shape. Not only when you see the koi on the top, but also on the side. You want to have those straight lines because when a koi gets older and it gets more fat, that you want the koi to distribute the fat all over the body. So you get a very nice and even shape all over the body. On the third part, or I mean on the left part, you see that the third part of the body is not on a straight line. It's a kind of bended. This is yeah, basically it's still okay, but I always call those fish helicopter bodies because if you see a helicopter on the side, you have basically the same type of body shape. When you look at the other side, probably it's even more visible that you see that the head is powerful, the shoulders are powerful, very nice backbone. I think the body is still pretty long, but the third part lacks, yeah, a lot of power. The fat is basically all in the belly and not well distributed to the tail tube. And when you look at the koi on the right, you see that the body lines are very straight and the fat is well distributed. So as a result of this, you can see that the koi on the left has a much better pattern, much more fun, looks more attractive. On the right, you see the ugly duckling Nisai, but still, on body-wise, the ugly Nisai is a better koi than the koi on the left. When you look at koi when they are older, so this one is 5 years old and 85 cm, as a champion in Europe now, and you see the same body lines as you saw here on the right, but then with a little bit more fat. So this koi, when it was younger, it also has the body shape on the fish on the right, it became older, 5 years old, got more fat, but still maintains those long body lines. And that's why the body of those fishes can be very big and powerful. So then it's the question, how could you get a body on a koi like this? Yeah, and a very short answer is just buy a very good fish from Sakai or Dainichi, because those two farms together won the last 17 Grand Champions on the All Japan Koi Show. Yeah, which is a ridiculous amount. Most of them are from Sakai, but Dainichi also has quite a lot. Um, and the reason for that is because they have very, very good bloodlines. Dainichi, his famous bloodlines are X Junior and Mihara. Those bloodlines are very classic Dainichi. They made them on the early 2000s and are still reproducing them because they have such good characteristics. Um, and now still they are at other farms, they are implementing these bloodlines into their koi. So what you see is from X Junior and Mihara, you have a lot of grand champions or jumbo champions uh, from these bloodlines. On the left, you see the grand champion of 2018, grand champion of 2016, and the third fish is the most important parent koi, or was at Changlong Koi Farm of Mr. Pan. This koi won jumbo champion and later on shipped to China, became a parent fish, and yeah, also on a koi show, which was I think in January or late or December, an offspring of this fish became a grand champion in China. So that's also a late offspring of those X Junior bloodlines. On the right, you see I think the best jumbo champion, which is the second place on All Japan Koi Show ever, because this koi lost to S Legend, and I think on every other year that they would enter this fish, it would win, only not against S Legend. So very high level on that year. But also those two show us. On the left, you see the grand champion of this year from recently. On the right, you see the jumbo champion of 2 years ago, are offspring of those X Junior bloodlines. Because what Dainichi did, they created a very good Kohaku bloodline, and then thought, oh, maybe if we have those very good Kohaku bloodlines, we can also implement those into Showa bloodlines. Another what they did, they crossed Dainichi Classic Showa with Momotaro Showa, and those bloodlines together with Ik Junior Kohaku, in the hope they will get very, very good Showas. And the results of those crossings were Mona Lisa, which is a very famous bloodline, Super Monster, which is a very famous bloodline, and Big Bang. Big Bang is the bloodline on the koi on the left. Super Monster is the bloodline on the koi on the right, or Gacha X, sorry. But yeah, you see that those kinds of bloodlines from Kohaku also get implemented into Showa bloodlines. Because on the right, you see the bloodline Gacha X, and those X on Gacha, after Gacha, stands for X Junior. So X Junior is the Kohaku bloodline, you see here, and the Gacha X, you can see on the X part, that they implemented Kohaku into Showa. And that's why they get Dainichi such beautiful and big Showa, which I think are the very best in the world. And now if you look at Sakai, Sakai also had a quite a similar strategy. They implemented Ochiba and Karashigo into the bloodlines. First, they started with Ochibas in 2007, on the picture on the right. They crossbreeded a Kohaku together with an Ochiba of 1 meter 5, and called those bloodline the Dynamite Ochiba bloodline. Many koi of Momotaro, many koi of Sakai, and also from Dainichi are late offsprings of this bloodline. But the best of all was the bloodline on the left, which is the New Impact bloodline. It's a very well thought name, because New Impact really had a very big and new impact. The Kohaku you see on the left is offspring of a Karashi crossed with a Kohaku. And I did it for a long period. They tried very long, but it is very hard to get a very good pattern and very red pigment koi with white shiroji from Karashi females. So they tried, and later on got the New Impact bloodline. And what the advantages of the new impact bloodline is that it has the very high growth potential of the Karashi from the female, but it has the Gosanke looks. Uh, and what I thought at Sakai, if we now have those Karashi Kohaku and we cross it with a male Sanke, we hopefully get very big and beautiful Gosanke, so Sanke, Kohaku, and maybe later on Showa. And the results were very good because only at the last All Japan Koi show, the jumbo champion was 6 years old at 1 meter, which is the offspring of the new Impact bloodline. And the Kokuyo of 95 Gyu, which is the biggest size, was 1 meter 8 at 8 years old. The koi on the right is owned by Mr. Guan from Suchin Koi Farm and was the grand champion of 2 years ago. They tried again this year, but they lost to the Dainichi grand champion. But what you see is that those fishes are able to grow to 1 meter at 6 years old, or basically 5.5 years old. The koi on the left was a Sansai when it was 2.5 years old, 83 cm. When it was 4.5 years old, it was 93 cm and 23 kilos, which is really a ridiculous weight and size for goat sanke. And this is only a result of those crossbreeding with Karashigoi. Because what Sakai did is that all classic Sakai bloodlines that were made from crossing Gosanke with Gosanke, so Kohaku with Kohaku, Sanke with Sanke, they removed it and they only went on with all Karashi-based bloodlines. On the right, you see the Shogetsu Sanke. Shogetsu is the name of the bloodline. This koi was also 1 meter at 6 years old, now 1 meter 8 approximately at 8 years old. Also a very close offspring to Karashi because I think she is 12.5% or 25% Karashi. And also had a ridiculous growth result. And now, upcoming year, she will be a parent koi at Sakai. So she will be a new generation of modern type Sanke. So only at the last All Japan Koi show, you saw that from X Junior, Mihara, and new Impact bloodlines, you saw that all the big prizes went to those bloodlines because the grand champion is part offspring of X Junior. The jumbo champion, which is the second place overall at the show, is from New Impact. The Kokugyo prize, which is the best koi overall and the biggest size, except the champions, is from New Impact line. And the koi on the right, which is I don't think you see it, but it's the Kohaku from Dainichi. It's also an X Junior offspring. And this is the best Gosanke in the biggest size. And then we are at the part 2, which is patience. And this is Sensei and her favorite koi. On the left, you see, again, an ugly duckling, Nisai from Dainichi, 50 cm at 2 years old. Benny doesn't look too good. Sumi is not there on top level, but it later on grew to the grand champion of, I believe, 2008. I don't think I'm exactly right, but around that period was 83 cm. And for Dainichi, this is for them this is the best show they ever bred. Maybe not on body terms, but the development is so special. Sumi quality, Benny quality is very very special. And you see if you have this koi on the left as Nisai and you think, oh, it won't be too good, and you will sell it to or just put it in a very bad pond or something. Still, it shows that sometimes if you show a lot of patience for koi, the true beauty can come out. And that's what I wanted to tell about Sashi and Kiwa related to patience. If here you see a Kohaku at 1 year old, and if we zoom in into the Kiwa, which is the back part of the Benny plates, so actually the part of the Benny that points to the tail is named the Kiwa, and the part of the Benny that's on the front that points to the head is named Sashi. And they have a very close relationships to each other, and that's what I'm going to explain now. If you look at the zoom in part, you see that the Kiwa is pretty much divided. You see it's from scale to scale to scale, and it looks not like it's really put well together. There's a lot of pigment in those scales. But what's the result after 1 year? is that it's now really put into one beautiful straight line. Looks even that you picked a knife and really got a very beautiful line. And how you can predict that it's going to happen, and that's when you look at the sashi. And the sashi, again, is the part of the beni that looks of that points into the part of the head of the fish, so the front part. And you always see like a very orange or pink glaze on that part of the scales. And that glaze or shine of orange is actually beni that comes from underneath part of the skin layers. Like there are four skin layers on the koi, for example. The bottom skin layer is very, very red. I'll explain that later as well. And that very red layer shines to the top parts of the skin. Over here, you see that there's a very orange layer on the front of every bony part. But when you look at the koi when it's older, you see that all those bony parts are basically gone. Uh, and the only reason for this is that the skin layers, so the layers that are on top of the very red bottom layer, became thicker. When a koi gets older, the skin layers get thicker, and then you don't see the shine of the bottom layer anymore. And that's what I want to explain with yeah, this picture is that here you see four skin layers, and the bottom one is very, very red. And you see if you have a sashi on a yonkoi of 1 to 1.5 scales of orange glaze, you see that later on the glaze is better to vanish, more able to vanish. And here you see when you have too little sashi is that the bottom layer of the skin is not super red. And a result of that is that the depth of your beni, so the power of your beni on the red of the koi, is not super good. And a result of that, if you're gonna grow a koi with too little sashi, so not very deep beni, is that you're gonna stretch the beni because when a koi grew, you stretch your beni. Same if you do like this on your skin when you're really brown, when you've been in the sun for a long time, you do this, your skin will become more white. That's the same with koi. If you grow it, the pigment will be stretched, and you want to your koi to keep very good beni quality. But when you have on a young koi too little sashi, then the beni is not deep enough to hold this stretch. So if you want a very big koi but have too little sashi, the koi will grow. The beni will stretch, but the beni will also break. Because then you will see white lines on the beni, or the beni will just vanish all over the koi because the pigment is not deep enough. And on the right is when you have too much sashi. So when not only the bottom layer of the skin is very red, but also the layers on top, then you will see a very, really like reddish layer on top. And when it's too big, so 2+ scales, so when you have one scale of red and then a scale orange, then it's very hard for the sashi to vanish, even when it gets bigger. You will always see a very or a little orange glaze shining through the skin layers. So this is what I mean with sashi. This koi was on the WNC auction of last November. I tried to buy it, but it was really too expensive, unfortunately. But this koi had really the perfect sashi layer, and I will explain that now. If you have a koi with perfect sashi layer, so let's say one scale, you see that on the left it's the same as I showed you before. Very red on the bottom layer, a little bit pink on the top layer, and on the right you see that it's still very red in the bottom layer, and that's what you want. You still want that very deep and full pigmented beni, but the layers of the skin became thicker, so more together, and you see that now the top layer is white instead of pinkish. And that's just because of not because something magic happened, because the koi get older and the skin layer become thicker. So this is a result of good sashi. When you see a good sashi, and you see it over here as well. If you look at the first pattern, for example, you see a very well divided line of sashi next to the big Benny pattern form one beautiful scale. And then is what you get later on is that those pinkish layer will get super white when this fish gets older. And this is when you have too little sashi. A 1 year old, it's very white already. So you have a white Benny plate or a red Benny plate with very white shiroji next to each other. And then later on, when the koi grows and the skin layers become thicker, you see that the white is going to take over the red pattern. And that's because the skin also gets thicker, and then the white basically wins over the red. Yeah, it's very hard to find a good example of this, mostly because yeah, breeders also recognize this sashi and benny power at young age, and they remove it from their selections. But what what is also koi which have very little sashi are koi on shows, because on shows sashi is not very wishful. Judges don't want to see big sashi on young koi, um, because yeah, it's not very beautiful. So also for myself, I've had some beautiful koi that won at Aldersbank koi shows or junior koi shows in Japan, for example. They went into the mud pond, grew 1 season, and after 1 season, the Benny was either gone or completely awful. And that's because for shows, it's very good to have no sashi, because it looks very beautiful, red to very white. But when you want to grow the koi, you have to stretch off the pigment, and then the white is going to take part of the red. Yeah, and then your pattern will be very, very ugly. So you see on the left of super nice Nisai, which I think is very good for the koi show. But the sashi on this fish, for me personally, is not very good. So I think if you're going to grow this koi very hard, the Benny eventually will break. And then you have, and the last part is when you have too much sashi. So let's say 2 scales or over 2 scales, is that the bottom layer of the skin is very red, the layer on top is very red, the layer on top of that is very red, and then you have a very orange sashi layer. When the koi gets older, you get the same procedure. The skin gets thicker, but the skin is not able to become thick enough to remove all the shine coming through from the bottom layers of the red. So for Yonkoi, it looks like this. I think you can see that the sashi of this is not very well divided together. And some scales are very, yeah, you have a red and then a very big scale or 2 scales of orange. So for this koi, you will never have very straight lines of the Benny pattern. But I always say to my customers, if you have to choose for better too little or too much, you can better have too much sashi, because then you will be more sure that your Benny will hold. So even though you will get those, still have those sashi when the koi gets older, it's better to have a very beautiful kohaku with little sashi at 6 years old than a kohaku with no red at all. So basically a shiramuji. I think that's a better way of choosing for too much sashi than too little. And then you also have an alternative route, and that is just to have some cosmetic procedures. And this is the last grand champion of Mr. Pan. On the left is when it was sold at Narita Arts Collection, and on the right it's when it became grand champion 2 years later. Quite a change as well. So the conclusion is there are different routes to Grand Champion. Select on body shape, good sashi and kiwa. Pray for some luck. Go to the church every Sunday, and maybe then you will be able to be the next Mr. Pan. With 4 Grand Champions, all are very different route to Grand Champion. And the moral of the story is that it's super hard to predict Koya Young age, even for breeders, even for Mr. Pan himself, who has seen many koi in his life. So you need a lot of luck, and you have some points that you can predict on, but it doesn't tell the whole story. And that was it. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Siebe. So I hope Now is question and answer session. So if you have any questions, yeah, it's just some speech. Thank you so much, Siba. Yes, so now is question and answer session. So if do you have any question, you can just turn on your phone and then you can ask directly, or you can write here in chat function. Yes. So
Yeah, Fifi says that we must have lots of money first to become Mr. Pond, but actually the first fish was only it's a lot of money, 2,000 euros. So that's I think it's more doable for more persons. But yeah, you sometimes you need a lot of money, but there are also some grand champions that yeah were less than 10,000 euros. So it's I think if you have a lot of luck uh, and some patience, then yeah maybe ever once in your lifetime you will have a very cheap grand champion.
Siebe, a question.
Yes.
We saw in the last years that the koi have an enormous length compared to 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
10 years ago, a Yonsei was, when you were lucky, 68. Now we have this enormous growth. Do you think that will midterm cause health problems for the kois because they are growing, or they are forced to grow so fast?
Yeah, I think that every koi that grow very fast is also growing very fast to death.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to have a very beautiful koi for a very long time, if you keep them on 16 degrees Celsius for the whole life, they will get very, very, very old. But they won't get super big and they won't get super heavy. So it's yeah, you have to choose for one of those. I always say to my customers as well. Yeah, you can the Kohaku you buy, it can become 30 years old, but it depends on your keeping. If you want the Kohaku to reach the full potential, then you also yeah that costs you some living years of the fish. I'm sure of that. I think it's not only about the grow, but more about the keeping method. The higher temperature, koi are like cold-blooded animals. So, like we as humans, we always have like the same time, for example, the time of living, because we are always 37 degrees Celsius. Hopefully, if you are healthy. With koi, the speed of living it depends on temperature of the environment. So if the pond is 10 degrees, their life is super slow. Everything is super slow. But when the temperature of the pond is 25 degrees, everything is super fast. So that time, relatively, on winter time, it's like this, very slow because the temperature is cold, and in summertime, it's like this because the temperature is very high. And the koi you saw on my presentations, which are 6 years old, 1 meter, they are always kept above 22 degrees. So they are always on a very high speed of life for fishes.
What I also noticed is that, and you had one of this kind of koi in your presentation, is these enormous fast growing koi. Some of them have an enormous body, and when you look to the head, the proportion of this enormous body to the head, it is like you take a Monopoly small head and put it on a big koi. So the proportion is not longer, the body line is lost.
Yeah, but you saw on the fish that became jumbo champion also this year and last year. Yeah, it was also quite a debate last year that the head was super small. But that's just basically because what you're saying, the fish is so big and so heavy, but very young still. And the head is made of bone structure, so it needs more time to grow bigger and bigger. What you saw from this year compared to last year is that last year the head was really, really too small. This year already became bigger. So I think next year, when probably they're going to enter it again at 1 meter 4, for example, and then the koi is 7 years old, maybe the head will be in better proportions because yeah, the bone structure needs longer period to grow.
I'm always impressed about your knowledge about the bloodlines. I'm really pleased about that, and I'm absolutely sure that in 1 or 2 years' time you will be able to name the bloodline of the first red fish which appeared 150 years ago in a rice field of in Japan. So
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
yeah. And the second thing I always learn from other koi keepers and koi specialists like you, and I also learned today that what did you call it? I have definitely a helicopter body.
You have what? Sorry.
I have a helicopter body.
Oh, helicopter body.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yeah, but it's a pretty right explanation if I thought about it myself. You have helicopters also like the tail part and then the belly.
yeah.
And on koi you have sometimes you have the same.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I ask? Thank you first for your presentation, Siebe. I'm Panos from Greece. Additionally to Ralph's question, I would like to say, how do the breeders succeed so long kois? Is it the feeding or the bloodline or a combination of those two?
Actually,
What do
I
you
think
think?
the biggest part is keeping together with bloodlines. And what also very hard to think about, I always tell to my customers as well, is that for your pond, you have to, for example, if you drive to a dealer and you select fishes or a breeder, you have to choose between 10 koi that fit your budget, for example. But then for Sakai Fish Farm, if we take that case, yeah, they can choose about millions of fish, millions. So from all the years of experience, they already saw from 30 years ago, from those millions of fish, what were the best ones. So they are always super lucky to select from the best ones, and still they are sometimes wrong. But the koi you see on those pictures that are 6 years old and 1 meter are really one of maybe 10 million. And still, it needs to be very lucky that they keep on living and they develop like this. But also other koi that are not 6 years old and 1 meter, but for example, 6 years old and 90. Yeah, those new bloodlines are really a new impact. It's named new impact, but it was a new impact. Because Ralph said as well, 10 years ago, we were happy with 4 years old and 68, or 3 years old and 60. 2 years old, 50 was pretty big. And if I have now a 2 years old fish, which is 50, my customers will say to me, that's pretty small. When I have a 4 years old of 70, my customers will say, yeah, then it won't reach 90 anymore. Because, yeah, that's also strange compared to 10 years ago. The biggest view 10 years ago was 90 view, but now they have to make bigger sizes on koi show to judge because there were too many fishes that became bigger than 90. And that's a result of Sakai created New Impact, Danish created X Junior. They made a very big fish, and other smaller breeders start buying those bloodline fishes from them. So they are implementing those bloodlines into their bloodlines as well. And what you see now is that also smaller breeders have knee size of 60, yawn size of 75, 80. And yeah, and that's a result of Sakai and Dainichi, which are the big breeders, creating very good bloodlines. And it drops down to, yeah, later on my facility as well. And maybe yours.
Okay, and another question I would like to make is because here in Greece, in summertime, we have in our ponds, let's say from 27 till 34 degrees. What do you think about feeding? Can we feed above some temperatures? I mean, what is the safest temperature to feed? I mean,
actually, I think the best temperature to grow them is 25. And I know it's hard for them to increase on your temperature outside to keep them on 25. But in Thailand or Malaysia, they have like the same issues with temperature. They cool some ponds down because what you get on higher temperatures than 25 is that koi they get more active when the temperature gets higher, and also they want to eat more when temperature gets higher. But that peak that is on 25 degrees. So the top of the peak is on 25. If you go to a higher temperature than 25, for say 26, 27, and on 32, I think they won't eat much anymore. And that's also what sometimes Japanese breeders have in their mud ponds, because in Niigata it can be very hot as well. And then the water gets too hot, the fish won't eat anymore, and then as a result they have very small koi at harvest in autumn. So what I would recommend, if it's possible, is to cool down your pond. Like 27, I think it's okay, but above 27 is very risky.
Okay, thank you.
So in China, I know that they use a special machine to cool down the water in summer. Exactly.
And it's like the
Injection
opposite
for
of
the
breeders.
water.
And because I
Like
reheat
chillers.
my ponds every day, and they're cooling it down.
Interesting. We visited the DHY koi farm, and we saw a lot of big koi, very big koi. And on every concrete pond, he had a cooling system.
Yes.
And Ben had a look at it, and the maximum temperature that he was allowing was 25.5 degrees. Means from 20.5, if they reach a temperature of 25.5, the cooling system starts and cools the water at maximum 25. That is because it's also very hot in China. That is the same. They cool it. We have heater on every pond, and they have cooler on every pond.
Yeah.
So
So what I understand is that it's better to grow koi in spring and autumn, because those are the ideal temperatures for Greece.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think so. And what's also the thing about, for example, on autumn time, if this is the case in Netherlands, I don't know if in Greece it's actually the same. But when we going to, for example, the months of September and October, November, every day gets a little bit shorter. It's becoming dark pretty early later on, and Koi noticed that. And even when you have the high temperature of 25 degrees, they are thinking from themselves, oh, days are getting shorter. I need to eat more because winter is coming. And that's still because of 150 years ago, they needed that to keep on living in the winter. Now they don't anymore because they are the best treated fish in the world. But they still have that thing in mind that, oh, when days get shorter, I need to eat more. And that's why some breeders want to keep their koi longer in the mud pond, because those periods close to October, November, September, they eat the most and they grow the most. So yeah, in summertime, I know it sounds like, oh, it's warm, the koi grow the most, but I always say on spring and summer, it's more like a preparation for autumn. If you have your koi very healthy in the early of autumn and the days get shorter, you can feed your koi so much that they will grow the most on those 3 months. So I think it's pretty beneficial for you as well, because the temperature then is not too high.
Thank you.
Siebe,
Yes.
I send you on the chat function 3
Yeah, I
questions
see them now.
we collect from another customers. So maybe you can answer it. Have a look, check.
Yeah. So first question is, from when and how can you determine the gender of jumbo tosai? And it really depends on the fish. Sometimes you can see when they are 8 months old. Sometimes you are not even able to see when they are 18 months old. You really have some special cases where, yeah, even Japanese breeders say, "Oh, I really don't know." But I think the most of them you can be 80% sure when they are about 10 months old. So now there are all the tosai that are sold, or most of them are still unknown, so unknown gender. And then on the late March, early April, then it's when you get the female no guarantee. So 80% sure it's female. Yeah, then you get those selections. So I think the sweet point is around 10 months old. And then you have, how can I recognize when a koi is finished? And that's what I explained about the sashi. When you don't see much sashi anymore, for kohaku, for example, you can check whether, yeah, the koi is finished when the skin layers is very thick, but also you can see it on the shine of the fish. And finish, you mean like going down, or finish like it's the best ever quality?
And finish, it means that okay, we can see the development is now.
I like the best condition ever.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, for most of them, it's more about living years. They are koi mostly peak, I think, in recent years between 5 and 8 years old. Like 10 years ago, what Rolf was saying as well, the peak was between 8 and 10, 12, but the peak also became much earlier now. So yeah, you can look at the sashi. If the sashi is gone, the skin is still shiny. So when the koi is still young, you have still a shiny skin. And also when the pigment is very deep. When you see koi growing, you have the stretch of the pigment, which I explained with the skin. When you are in the sun and you became brown and you stretch, you see the white. Koi also have that when they grow, and when they grow less. So let's say when they get from 4 to 5 years old, they grow 5 more cm. Then the pigment is also able to become very thick again, and then yeah, you have a very beautiful color, very beautiful skin, and shiroji next to Benny, so no sashi anymore. I think that's when the koi is finished. Most are between 5 and 7 to 8 years old these days. And what influences the stability of Benny? Yeah, growth and feeding. So basically temperature and feeding, because you can feed them color foods, which influences the Benny pigment. Temperature, if you keep them at 16, for example, for a very long time, they don't grow much anymore. So that's the same story as I told 2 minutes ago. Then the pigment is not stretched anymore and the pigment becomes deeper. So when you keep a koi for 9 months on 90 cm, for example, or 90 degrees, for example, the koi won't grow much, and the Benny will become deeper and it's more stable. And also sunlight, because sometimes I keep koi indoors at quarantine, for example, and now I have some lights that mimics the sun, but still there's nothing better than sunlight. If you need a very thick Benny, you need sunlight, I think. So temperature, sunlight, feeding are the most important factor to keep your Benny very stable.
One more question compared to Benny.
Yes.
Sorry. I've noticed in some cases here when the temperature rises, that even if you have a Tancho Kohaku, in 1 week or 2 weeks it loses the Benny here in Greece. Is it related to temperature, you think? Because I've noticed that happens only when the temperature rises suddenly, and they are losing the Benny forever.
Yeah, they're losing the Benny forever. And that's also the same with the growth. If you have a high temperature, there's a lot of growth. And what's happening with tanchos is on the head, you don't have to de-Benny like you have on the Benny. So if the tanchos start growing very hard, which is pretty doable, but still, you still have quite high chances of the tancho to break. But I think for tancho kohakus, yeah, first of all, they are all forced to be a tancho. And the thing is that not many become big with a very beautiful tancho spot, only very few pieces. So it's also temperature thing, but it's also a variety thing. It's super hard to find tanchos of over 90, for example. I know in Dainichi there are one or two that are close to a meter, but at Nisai they have mud ponds full with tanchos. But all those beautiful tancho Nisai, I think 90% of them lose their spot when they grow. So it's just also lucky and temperature related. If you keep them on very low temperature, I think they are more able to hold their spot, but even then it can still happen.